Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to Kansas City, Kansas Public Library in our program Caring for Indoor Plants in Winter. Let's welcome our presenter today, Dylan Parsley, horticulture agent with K-State Research and Extension for Wyandotte County. Dylan?
Hi there. Yes, as Elena said, I am the Wyandotte County Extension horticulture agent. I deal with all manner of plant questions, soil questions, any type of things you may wonder about growing, about seasonality. I'm really into things like gardening, fruit, vegetable production. But when they reached out and asked to do a fun class on houseplants and how we can keep them thriving in the winter, I was happy to jump at that. I'll go ahead and switch to the next slide with a little bit more about me. As I said, my office, I reside here at the Wyandotte County branch. And as I said, if you ever have questions about plants, crops, gardens, insects, soil, reach out to me. It's my job. I'm happy to hear. I'm happy to answer any questions or put you in the right direction of somebody who can answer those questions, even if it's not my area of expertise. I have listed some of my contact information. You can always reach me an email. Right now, our hours are 8 to 4:30 p.m. So you can either give me a call or you can stop by the office, and I'd be happy to give you some materials and discuss whatever you'd like to. A little background about me. Before this position, I worked as a ornamental nursery grower just south of Ottawa, Kansas. So I was mostly growing landscape plants at that time. As you can see in the background here, I worked a lot with woody shrubs, perennials, trees, um, and producing those on kind of a large scale that we would send out to garden centers, landscapers, things of that nature. And it was a really fun time, but definitely not super bummed out to be working indoors most of the time now. So yeah, we'll go ahead and jump to the next one. So just wanted to talk a little bit about, for those who may not be familiar, about what extension is. As I said, we are a branch of Kansas State University Extension. And what that means is we provide Kansans with research-based educational opportunities to improve your lives, livelihoods in the community. We're taking that great research those folks are doing over at K-State and sharing it with you all and kind of giving you ways to apply it to things you're doing. In my case, that's going to be anything plant, garden related, landscape related. We are active in all 105 counties across the state of Kansas. Some of the branches are larger than others. We are fortunate to be in a larger area where I have the opportunity to specialize in something like horticulture that I'm passionate about. There are some agents who work very hard because they're the only agent in their county, and they do a great job nonetheless, and we all help each other out. If you kind of wanted a blurb to just kind of sum up what we are, we're a network of dedicated extension specialists, agents, researchers, and volunteers, such as, the master gardeners, master naturalists, who partner with Kansans like you to help solve your problems, understand key issues, because we are in this community and we are invested in the community. So it's something that we take very seriously. It's something that I take great pride in being able to help the fine folks who live in this county. And yeah. I love being able to hear somebody say, "Oh, that was a lot easier than I thought it was." So one reason why I'm glad to be putting this on today. Below, I've linked oh the link to KSRE. You can learn more about us, more about Wyandotte County branch in and of itself. So, and with that, we'll go ahead and jump right into houseplants. So I just wanted to start out with a little bit about when did we as humans start bringing plants into our house and kind of why did we do that? Um, our first record of this happening is actually about 5,000 years ago. Ancient Egyptians are thought to be some of the first people who decided this would look good in my house. And so they did just that. They brought them in, potted, and they started to realize, oh, this grows pretty well. And you'd have to think it kind of, livened up the place a little bit with the greenery, and it's just something that people were able to enjoy. And we can see that there's in some of these hieroglyphics that we find on some walls of tombs and pyramids, I'm guessing. that they had lotuses, they would do ferns, they would do palms. Um, and I think that's just a really cool kind of place to stop that we have so much in common with some of these ancient peoples. And that it's something that that's something that's been carried on too, that we continue to do in this day and age. So, and not surprising given that, ancient Egyptians were pretty keen in their knowledge of agriculture and interior decorating. So, next slide. So, what makes a house plant? I know we all probably have that plant that we think of whenever somebody says house plant, indoor plant. Just to name a few, something like one of my favorites is a pothos. And I'm sure there's a good likelihood if you've, been out anywhere to someone's house, or you probably have one in your own home or to a business, you're likely to see some greenery going on in there. So the definition of a house plant is an ornamental plant that's cultivated indoors for aesthetic or practical purposes. Practicality uh, could even be interpreted as something like air cleansing or fungi spore mold reduction, things of that nature, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. When they say ornamental or when they say aesthetic purposes only, one thing that does come to mind for me, other than that, would be maybe some bonsai trees can be used for small fruit production. And bonsai was something I almost got into with this talk, but I didn't feel like I'd be doing it a service by skimming over it, and I didn't quite have time to get fully into the weeds, so to speak, with that. So if there's interest, that might be something we could do down the line, and we could jump into the world of growing tiny trees. So back on topic, though, usually these plants are going to be native to semi-tropical, tropical, or more arid, hot areas, and this is why they typically are grown indoors, because here in the Midwest, as we're experiencing right now, they don't like the cold, they don't like the snow. That's not the area that they're native to, and they can't adapt to that. Um, this can kind of this can kind of lead to a beneficial, non-beneficial thing for us, beneficial to us because they don't grow as tall or as they probably would in nature, but that's good because we're usually keeping them in a space that we wouldn't want them to be that large, and nor would it be convenient or as it's aesthetically pleasing. So, but there are definitely some that you can also take outside. There's going to be one I'm going to touch on especially that does great outside in the warmer months, and that's something I do at my own house. I take my plants out once we start to get in the hot, and they do very well, and they like that. Just wanted to kind of throw this in here too. About 80% of indoor plants are in the US are produced in Florida. And after what I'm talking about, that kind of makes sense. Given that warm all year round, especially down in the Panhandle area, um, good growing season, and it's just a place where there's a lot of nursery production all across the board. But yeah, lots of good house plant and indoor ornamental foliage plants going down there in the Sunshine State. And one thing you'll see, as I was talking about, you'll see sometimes if you've ever been down there, you might see some plants that you would only see as house plants out in the landscape, which I just think is really cool. I went down to Florida not that long ago, got to see some really nice things right here, like this croton, beautiful, vibrant plant. And once you get them in the ground in an area where they can tolerate it, they just go off and full colors. And like over here, you'll see snake plants used as a hedge, which I just think is so cool. Love to see things like that thriving in the landscape where they're able to do that. And you may be asking, Dylan, why are you getting off topic about this? We're talking about house plants today. And I haven't quite lost you guys yet. The reason I bring this up is just to kind of get you in the mindset of how these things grow, what they like, and kind of be thinking about the environment you would want to try to cultivate in your home and kind of what makes these plants tick, so to speak. So, so, as I said, I might have spoiled it a little bit, but one of my favorite houseplants of all time is pothos or Epipurium aureum. If you've ever seen these, they're just a beautiful green vining plant. You can go in a couple different ways with this. Some people like to stretch them as far as they can go, make circles around the room, and that's really cool. Some people like to grow them tall, and they can't get very tall. They can It can get several meters tall actually with the proper supports. Um, so with the lighting for pothos, you're going to be wanting to look for, bright indirect sunlight is ideal. Um, that intense direct sunlight, as if it was shoved like right into a western facing window, can be a little much. That can end up getting a little bit of scorch on the leaves, and that's not ideal at all. So, and that, like I said, that can be difficult with a pothos, as sometimes there's some that tend to make circles around the entire room with their vines. So you can always trim those back to where they need to be or to fit the aesthetic of the room. So during the winter, it's definitely important not to overwater these things. Don't need a ton of water, maybe once or twice a week, maybe, I'm sorry, once every week or so, depending on how you kind of feel the soil out. That's going to become a common thing throughout this presentation, especially through the winter. You're really going to want to be able to gauge the water levels versus just sticking to a schedule because it can happen very quickly where we get these plants overwatered and then the roots can lead to rot. Um, as well as this point here about avoid fertilization during the winter. These plants are entering their dormant cycle, and so it'd be like if somebody kind of shook you awake in the middle of the night and said, "Here, eat this dinner." Probably wouldn't be too happy with that, and it would kind of disrupt your cycle that's going on. So it's best to wait till we get to spring in the warmer months when we kind of ramp back growing season back up again before we do any type of fertilization. Humidity is something you have to worry a ton about. They definitely will do better and they will appreciate it a little more if you can get the humidity up a little bit. But the average relative humidity of 40 to 60% is going to be just fine with this. So, right. And here we are, Dracaena trifasciata, the snake plant, another super popular one we just saw a couple slides back being used as a hedge in the landscape. These guys like some direct sunlight. It's not 100% necessary. They can do some indirect or lightly shaded area, but you will see the best growth with more sunlight. Um, Watering with these guys, they kind of go along with the pothos. They like their water, but they definitely don't want to be overwatered. That can lead to root rot. So, especially during the winter, really only want to water as much as you can to prevent from the leaves kind of puckering and turning into each other, kind of making both ends touch. It's not something you want going on. Also, this is another one, like I said, you're not going to want to fertilize these during the winter. It's just going to kind of throw its cycle off. Um, Humidity with these is uh, pretty across the board. Unless you're in just a very cold, dry house, I don't think you'll have much trouble with humidity. But definitely, you don't want it in a room, or sometimes I see people put them in an unheated garage, and that's not going to be ideal for their growth. Definitely don't want that to dip below 55. If you do, you are running the risk for some significant injury there. Another thing with these, they do kind of get crowded in the pot pretty quickly. Um, Winter can be a decent time to kind of take stock and be able to separate some of those before so you don't kind of interrupt their growing cycle whenever you start to hit their stride in the spring and summer. All right, who doesn't love a poinsettia? Um, these Now is the time where we're going to see a lot of these. I'm sure if you've been out and about anywhere, you're probably seeing these on the shelves, whether it be at, your Walmarts, all these, any type of place. Now is really the big push time to sell your poinsettias. There's an old adage in the industry, you won't sell a single poinsettia on December 26th, and that's very true. You might as well pitch them after that. They're fun plants. They can definitely be finicky. One thing about these, they do like their light, but too much can cause leaf scorch. And when you get the leaf scorch, you're going to ruin some of those that color that we're seeking with our poinsettias. And fun fact, these leaves are actually called bracts, and so these bracts are actually modified flower petals, and that's why they kind of have that color. One technique that you kind of have to do, well, you have to do to be able to set that color off is you have to change their light cycle. Poinsettias are a day length or light cycle determinate plant. Therefore, once the day length becomes shorter, that's when there's metabolic activity that's going to tell them, oh, it's winter time. We need to change our colors. So you can do that by interrupting the light cycle. One thing we can do is if you have just one, put it in a closet for a certain amount of time, maybe from 5 to 5, or however you think is appropriate, and then bring them back out. So that will kind of give it the signal, hey, the day is now shorter. I need to change. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, a poinsettia is just a single season thing. No, you can keep them growing and growing. They really will keep it up. Um, so watering the winter, poinsettias are finicky with water, and it's kind of unfortunate because they're kind of unforgiving in my experience. Kind of got to feel it out. The top of the soil feels dry. And definitely the pot. That's one of the biggest indicators in my experience is when that pot gets very, very light, you really need to get some water in there because once they hit that wilting point, it's going to be detrimental to the plant. I've grown poinsettias in kind of a not a large scale by any means, but a commercial setting. We were growing poinsettias, and we would always joke if you don't get the poinsettia the water it needs, it will it will whine and say, "Don't even bother," and just die. So that's never fun. But poinsettias can be beautiful. I love a poinsettia, but I think as I was talking to Elena about before this, I have cats, so I do not keep poinsettias in the house. There's actually been some debate on whether they are as toxic to cats as has previously thought. So it's definitely there's milky sap inside of the stems that can give pets and people in high enough concentrations some real stomach issues. So I just avoid them altogether, but I do love seeing them, and I love seeing them in displays this time of year. And as we were talking about earlier, the Schulenberger holiday cactus. I put holiday cactus because there's several. You've got your Christmas, your Thanksgiving, your Easter, and identification with these things is almost a whole nother class in and of itself. So, um, that's something that you can kind of tell from these leaf shapes, and kind of tell what's going on with those. So they do like a good amount of indirect sunlight. They will have some difficulty in direct sun. They will kind of get a little bit of burn going when you have that. So just like our poinsettias, these are day length sensitive. So another one that you can alter the light cycle of, and that will induce a little bit of flowering. Depending on where you have them, they may sense this on their own, but if you have them in a place where they're facing sun all day, you may have to intervene. And kind of like I talked about with the poinsettias, you may have to uh, exclude them from light in one way or another. Um, being that these are in the cacti succulent family, watering is already kind of a sparse thing. When you're watering, you definitely want to allow a complete dry back or dry down before you start watering again. Um, Higher humidity will benefit this plant. You can definitely, if you can up that in ways like maybe keeping them in a bathroom, things of that nature, humidifiers, it will definitely help it. Proper drainage is going to be imperative with this one. You definitely want your containers to have a drainage hole. You definitely want to make sure when you're watering to a runoff, aka water is going to be coming out the bottom, and just so that the plant's roots can experience that moisture in the soil, but they definitely don't want to have wet feet lingering. They don't want to that can kind of up their chances of being susceptible to root rots. No good. Um, During the winter, they do kind of slow their metabolism down a little bit. So You can go a little lower with the temperature or in a room that may be slightly lower temperatured. And that can actually lead to more flower production. That kind of, they're very in tune with that and they can kind of sense what that season is and it's time to put the flowers out so that we can reproduce. Amaryllis, another really cool plant. It's not the best picture for being able to see this, but you do have these bulbs that you can plant in a well draining, moisture holding kind of container here because they're going to come straight out of the bulb. So when blooming and after, it's really important that amaryllis has lots of light in a nice warm area, kind of as this picture would suggest. It's a very lighted, maybe near a window, and a place where it's going to not be drafty. They definitely like a little bit warmer of temperatures. So irrigation, you when you're blooming, that's going to be a crucial time to get the water in there. That's going to give those roots at the bottom of those bulbs something to soak up and be able to push those beautiful flowers out. Um, it's also important to get a good fertilization when you're watering. That helps the plant's bulb kind of restore those nutrients and carbohydrates that it's losing whenever it's making flowers like this. Um, and whenever you start to see that top 2 inches of soil media drying out, it's about time to water again. Uh, a high phosphorus fertilizer is going to benefit these two and help in that flower production. So, and if you want them to keep coming back every year, once they once those blooms kind of start to trail off and they start to lose their shine a little bit, you can cut those back and they can keep coming back year after year. African violets, another really pretty plant that I always liked with the leaves. They kind of have that pubescence on them that makes them almost kind of soft and fuzzy. Um, Also a very easy plant to propagate too. These you can separate these, and it's really beneficial to the plant, and it's something that you can make more plants with too. So with these plants, about 14 to 16 hours of light and about 18 hours to, that doesn't add up, but a little less darkness in order to flower. So not quite as light determinant as our other two plants that we were discussing, our poinsettias and our amaryl, or not amaryllis, but our other two plants, our Christmas cactus. And a bright and cool location is going to be good. So this could be that one that if you've got a drafty spot in the house, might not be too bad for putting the old African violet. Um, One thing that will get these though is root rot. So water is going to be a big consideration, and how you water is going to make a big difference. One thing I see people doing, when I was doing research, is you're going to want to avoid using softened or chlorinated water. um, that's going to be something that is going to really mess with the root system and the uptake of those nutrients. It's going to block some things that the plant desperately needs. And if you're able to use any type of filtered water, reverse osmosis, it's going to definitely benefit the plant. Well draining soil is going to be super important. Root rot being one of those deals where too much water is hanging around the soil and those roots can't breathe. And that's something that's going to be a big time factor for whether your plant is healthy and flowering or what I've seen happen with these is this water will get trapped in the stems of the plant and it'll just get real mushy, almost like a straw that's holding this liquid. And then once that happens, it's game over essentially. Some things I see people doing in order to get that water distributed well is bottom watering. So they'll take a small container, half about and place the pot inside there so that it has time for that water to uptake, kind of distribute through the pot without absolutely sitting on top and draining and not getting down to where it should be. But if you're going to do that way, make sure you don't forget about them because, like we said, overwatering too wet a soil without any air, that's going to be detrimental to these plants. The peace lily. Um, I really like this plant a lot. I just think the contrast with the white on that deep green foliage is really pretty. The unfortunate part is they aren't hard to keep if you kind of know some of the tips and tricks for what they need. And it's unfortunate because you'll see these everywhere: banks, malls, shopping centers, businesses of other kinds. And what a lot of people do is they'll just put them in a window, and they don't like that so much. So it's unfortunate that a lot of people just kind of neglect their care in that way, but you don't have to because these plants are not hard as long as you know what you're doing. One thing, they are technically considered a shade plant, so they don't really want. That's why we see a lot of issues going on with these window sitters. Even if it's not, even if they're getting like only about half a day's worth of direct sunlight, that's too much. 2 hours of direct sunlight a day is really pushing it. Really want them to be more in the corner, somewhere where they can get filtered out sunlight. But yeah, it's definitely one that you can get it too quick. I have seen people utilize low level grow lights, supplemental light. It's something that they can kind of control how much they're getting with timers and reduced intensity. Another one is the water. I think a lot of these people just kind of throw water on them and think that that's going to be all right. Well, they don't really like heavy watering. That can also be detrimental to their growth. Um, because like I think we mentioned, a lot of places where these plants are growing. I believe this one is native to more South America, but super, kind of well drained, sandy soil that it rains a lot, but it's gonna stay. That's going to drain out quickly and it's not going to have super waterlogged roots. And I did forget to add it in here, but I'll just tell you, whenever you fertilize these, it's super important to do after they've had a chance to, have that fertilization. Super important to do a water rinse, kind of to wash some of those salts away, that fertilizer salts from the roots, because that can cause a toxicity really quickly with these. Um, just kind of give them a good rinse through, and then that will allow them to uptake nutrients, but it won't be hanging around and it won't cause them any issues. All right, so some of the temperatures, they do like a warmer location, which I was talking about, can kind of be frustrating because they don't like the light, but they want it warm. And so, something you can kind of do is, like I said, that's why I think a lot of people like to use those grow lights. They can kind of run them at a lower strength, but kind of in close proximity so that they can get a little bit of warmth there. Um, Ideal temperatures being in the like 65 to 85. Low temps, though, can really stunt this growth and give them more issues. So, one thing I saw is that if they ducking below ducking below 40 degrees can really have an adverse effect on this. And another thing to be mindful of with these plants is even a temperature difference of 10 degrees through the night can really give them issues. So if that's in a place that maybe gets a lot colder at nighttime, or maybe one of those people who likes to drop the temperatures in your house when you go to bed, might be the peace lily might be something to consider, getting some extra heat on. So, like I said, great plant, very striking. Can be can be kind of a challenge if you don't know what you're doing, but definitely a rewarding one to have. Another favorite of mine, Monstera deliciosa. Lots of different types of Monstera. big leaves, especially these ones with this variegation that you can see. I just think these are really cool, and they come in such variety. That's another part that I'm really drawn to. Um, and I think they just add a lot to the room. They're very tall, very showy, and good foliage too. So moderate shade they can tolerate. They can even do a little bit of bright indirect sun, but they definitely don't want to be out uh, in the blazing direct sun. I think what they're doing right here in this picture kind of highlights a good thing. Whoops, sorry. Um, Kind of a window with a shade cloth. That's a really good way to kind of break that light intensity, especially uh, depending on which way your window's facing and where you choose to do that. So, depending on the variety, or varies depending on the temperature and light, sorry, how much water they'll need. Like this big one is probably got a pretty advanced root system, so it's probably going to need a little bit more water. Depending on how much light it's getting right there, it may need more water. The more light it gets, the more it's going to need that moisture in order to photosynthesize. Um, this is another one where it's especially important to kind of gauge what the soil is doing before you just start to just watering it. Give it the 2 inch test with the finger, see how that soil feels. If it's very, very dry, it might be time to give it a good soak, but definitely one that you don't want to just decide, I'm just going to water it a little bit every day. That's where it's really not going to do well. Um, so with this plant during the winter, the temperature is going to kind of it's not going to be so much of a factor because they're going to kind of slow things down a little bit. They're not going to be devoting as much to growth. Um, but warm temperatures will help them feel a little more at home. 68 to 85 seem to be a good range that I was seeing across the board. And another thing you can do with these, they do like it a little more humid. So that can range either from possibly putting some more upping the humidity with one of the ways, maybe like a humidifier, bathroom where steamy showers. Another thing people I saw were doing, spraying the leaves off. That's going to kind of get a little more water in the air, make it a little bit more humid. And the plant will definitely benefit from that. Another one of my favorites, Tradescantia zebrina. This is just a beautiful plant and one that I've always enjoyed having around um, in one way or another, just because, like I said, they come in so many different varieties, colors. They're really easy to propagate too, and they just kind of add an element to wherever they're at. I thought these are fun because in warmer climates, like this is in Texas, I think Texas Tech, so probably around the Lubbock area, they can be kind of a ground cover, which is fun. Um, but here, that's not quite the case. They don't like it this cold. So my favorite way to present a trade Scanthia is in a hanging basket. I think, like I said, I think that really just sets off the room as a decoration for some more color and some more texture. So for the light, they do like full sun, and the way you can actually manipulate a tree Scanthia quite a bit with the amount of light it's getting. For its true, I think the example here is we have these variegate or striated variegated types of cultivar. And if you want that full color, you're really going to have to get full sun. They can tolerate a little bit of shade, but you definitely won't get that same deep color. Like you might be missing out on some of those deeper purples, almost reddish type colors. And also, they'll get kind of leggy. I have one at home right now that's not in the ideal spot, and it's looking a little straggly. So may have to find another place for it. Um, Keeping the soil moist and well drained is important. That's why I think they also do so well in hanging baskets. Because when you water them, they do have that chance to kind of drain out. It can, depending on where you have it, that can be an issue. But when I water mine, I just like to put it in the sink for a little bit, water it, let it drain. And so that stays pretty good. And they really do thrive in places in most temperatures indoors. So it's really you really won't hurt this one too bad by in a room that's a little chillier. Um, like I said, they you definitely wouldn't want them outside right now, but the temperature most people keep their houses at, let's say it's between 60 and 80, is gonna be just fine. Um, like I said, nothing beats a hanging basket style tradescanthia. Cacti and succulents. Cactuses are one of my favorite plants to display. I just think they're really fun. I grew up in the Midwest most of my life, and so I've just always thought the desert and the desert foliage is really cool. These are not my San Pedros, but I do have two San Pedros right now that I am cultivating, and hopefully they'll get big and tall really soon, um, because I think that's the mark of their happiness. Um, Definitely with these, get them as much sun as we can. Place them in a bright sunny window, south facing, um, or no, sorry, west facing, It's not south. West facing window where it's going to be a little warmer at the end of the day and where they're going to pick up on more of that. Um, Artificial, if you don't have a place like that, artificial lighting can be your best friend. That's something I utilize quite a lot with my cacti because I have no windows in my office, and so definitely something that is a lifesaver. Um, cool light fluorescence, a combination of both is going to be just fine. They just like their light. Um, Position and the positioning of those, positioning that light about 6 to 12 inches. I think that's a kind of a typo, but what it means there is position that light about 6 to 12 inches above the plants so that they can kind of achieve that intensity that they're looking for that they might get, in those more desert areas. Watering with cactuses can kind of be tricky. I think most people either water them too much or they just assume they need no water, and that's not the case. Definitely during the winter, they need much less. One thing you can tell about a cactus when it's not doing well, it gets a little squishy. That means it's kind of that inner tissue and that vascular system is not doing well. And so just you want to water just enough to prevent that. You can see in this picture, which is one reason why I put it, they're utilizing like a very, very draining media in order to plant these cacti in because they just absolutely will not tolerate wet feet. Makes sense, kind of the area they're from. Whenever you think about the desert, you'll have hard rains very quickly, and so they'll get saturated with water and then they'll lose most of it. So what I like to do is I just take the cacti, I put them in, like I said, the sink outdoors, just kind of make sure you've got a very well draining sand or vermiculite. There's special cactus blends that I think do very well. You can even add more drainage should you so choose. Um, just water deeply and thoroughly enough that it's all going to drain out. Cacti are just fun, I think. Propagating them is great, and you can just have a bunch of them. And speaking of propagation, let's move into that because who doesn't need more plants? My wife might say that I don't, but I think you made the joke, Elena. Hoarding, it's not having too many plants isn't hoarding, it's just horticulture. So I think those are great words to live by. The best time for propagation is going to be spring and summer. That's when we have the best growing conditions, so to speak. Um, But it can be done in the winter months if you can meet their temperature, light, and water needs. Taking cuttings, division. I put seed on here just to make sure I put it, but a lot of these house plants are very difficult to grow from seed, and there's just enough of them out there, and there's enough interest that getting a cutting isn't super difficult. If you just growing from seed can take a really long time, and it might not even turn out to be the ideal plant. So that's why propagation is so important. Um, you really only want to propagate healthy, vigorous plants that are free of disease. Some propagules can spread that disease, and now you've got multiple infected plants that could potentially spread to healthy plants. So we definitely don't want any of that. Um, Propagation can also benefit the plants that you're propagating from, the host. Sometimes they grow more than what they can handle. And so it helps them to be able to have that burden lifted off them a bit, to be able to focus on more growth versus having to, support some of those smaller things. Um, it's also, whoops, caught me off guard. And important to use, sterile equipment when you're taking these because that also reduces the spread of disease. So yeah, it's so imperative to clean your cutting tools with, alcohol, soap, hot water. Um, it's also super important to clean your potting uh, equipment because soil that's left on those, if there's a soil-borne disease going on or a pest, that can definitely spread to the next plant that you decide to plant. So it's always good to make sure you take the time on the front end to clean that stuff off and not have to deal with it later. Also, I always like to mention it's just never worth it to reuse potting soil. It's it, it's probably going to hurt more than it ever helps, more than what you're saving. And it's just better for the plant to start new. New soil is just going to be easier to work with, and it's going to be less of kind of a mystery about what it could be holding. So, like I said, I always like to put in the work on the front end so I don't have to deal with it on the back end. So let's discuss some propagation techniques. So here's one that I did recently. This is a Christmas cactus. And so all I did, you can do these with up to, if you even just take one of these little guys. And fun fact, cactus propagules are called pups. So take one of these
Oops.
little pups. Yeah, yeah. And so one of these little pups here, you can take one of these. You can take up to, as long as you want, really. But I took three just because I think that's a good number, maybe to start something. So I take these off and then I separated these. So I have each one. And so I let these sit for about 2 to 3 days to kind of harden off and kind of expel some of that moisture that's going to be coming out. And so just kind of left that in my office over the weekend. And then when I came back, got some of that cactus blend, that really well draining, good potting mix, and just popped them right in there. And so I hadn't checked it yet. I need to check and see how root development's going. And it's important to keep these more wet and moist throughout the propagation process because they're rapidly trying to, survive. And so it's just good to make sure all those needs are met, so that the propagules don't have to fight harder than they already do because it's propagation is never 100%. It can be kind of difficult. And so just give the plants and the propagules the best chance to survive. So here's another one that's pretty easy to propagate and something that I like to do, and I see a lot of people do, but sometimes they make some small mistakes, and I was hoping to clear some of that up today. Um, so as you can see here on the left, I've got the cutting that was graciously donated by our office assistant here. And so the the first assumption by a lot of people might be just to stick this in the ground or stick this in a pot. And while that's not impossible, it's not going to give you the best results. So what I do, there's two main points that you're going to want to focus on getting cuttings from. The number one point is going to be the tip. That is what we call the apical meristem. And so what that's going to be the top point of growth. And so what that means is the plant is sending all its nutrients, all its water, and it's all going to this very tip top point. And that's going to be It's kind of hard to see. I tried to get a good picture of this, but this little node here, that's going to be a new plant. So sticking that in the water and making new growth is going to give us the best chance for that plant to become a new plant. Another technique that is very popular and I like to use is this wedge method. So what'll happen is a lot of times people will just take one of these leaves off and try to propagate that. And it's not to say that that won't happen. But like I said, when you think of how nutrients and water are transported through a plant, it's going to go through this main stem. So when you cut that plant off that main stem, you're essentially cutting it off from the highway of nutrients and water being delivered. So it's kind of like taking the exit there and not the same as the main road. And that's kind of where this wounding sites are where that auxin is going to be the plant's regenerative rooting hormone. And so this is just going to give you a better chance at propagating this plant. Um, I have in the corner here. It's totally fine. I know this. After I made the presentation, I realized this could probably sound a little confusing, but pothos do just fine rooting in water. I know that kind of goes against what we were talking about with the soil and keeping it too wet. However, if it makes sense and if it's not convoluting things too hard, think of it like that soil when it's super wet, it's going to weigh down the plant and it's going to have difficulties getting oxygen aeration through. And so that's going to weigh it down more, which is going to cause the roots to kind of go into a shock state. Right, and we'll move on to this one. So I just wanted to touch on pests and disease. Plant pathology is a big interest in mine and a big area of my studies, and I'm continuing to study. So um, you might say, well, bugs and stuff are all over plants outside. What's the problem here? So the problem is a lot of these insects can disrupt the growth of your plants and they vector viruses and bacteria to other plants. So you could potentially get a pretty big outbreak and infection going on if it's not something you see too early to and and uh, and get ahead of. Speaking of that, getting infestations, they can be really difficult to control once they break out. A thrips infestation that's let go too long is just a nightmare, and it only gets worse with the more plants that you have. So it's really good to, keep an eye on that and make sure you're kind of taking preventative measures as well as keeping an eye out. But the good news is, with proper plant care and proper techniques, you can reduce the need for a lot of these for a lot of this stuff, and reduce the need for chemicals too, which is just huge. Some of the ways you can prevent pests and disease, water correctly and timely. We'll talk about here in a minute. There's a particular insect that I like to mention that really thrives from wet soil, and it can really be an issue. Keep these plants free of dead plant material. Letting your plants, if you just kind of let their leaves drop and hang out in the pot, you're really opening them up to potential disease because there's insects that like to feed on that. There are certain diseases that can live in the plant tissue, and they're just waiting to be watered again so that they can start the process over and just keep giving this plant issues. And as I touched on before, sanitizing your tools and containers is huge, especially if you're doing propagation. It's just going to help you on the front end, not having to worry about as much. And it's always important to scout for signs of pest activity, whether it be mechanical damage, signs the plants are presenting, such as yellowing, wilting, and things like that. Sometimes they can easily be mistaken for underwatering, overheat, underheat, but it's good to be able to recognize that. And I just wanted to throw this in here. It's something that I guess you would say is one of the pillars of plant pathology and disease. Disease really has three main pillars that it comes from. A lot of plants don't just get diseases or for no reason, essentially. So what you have is a disease, and what you need all three of these things for a disease. You need a host, and in many times it's a susceptible host for one reason or another, whether it be biotic, weather-related, what have you. A favorable environment for that disease or pest to thrive in. So whether it be a lot of fungi favor a little bit cooler temperatures to germinate. Maybe it's a windy spot where spores can spread. Maybe it's, Ellen and I were talking about uh, pests like getting close to the window. Maybe if the plant's too close to the window, you're opening it up to susceptibility because of the location and the pathogen. The pathogen has to be right. It has to be able to survive off the plant and it has to be able to survive in the environment. So I like to share this any chance I get. So let's talk about some of the common insect pests of houseplants. Um, One of the biggest ones is fungus gnats, and fungus gnats are kind of unique in the sense that, oh, sorry, one second. Apologies, I've got a little bit of technical difficulty going on. How do I fix this? Ah, all right, we're back in business. Okay. Fungus gnats are scavengers, so they really like decaying roots and soil. This is the most important part. They love to live in damp potting soil. Like we talked about several times in this presentation, a lot of these plants are super easy to overwater, and when you get that root degradation, fungus gnats are on that. They love it. High percentage of peat, peat being one of those things that you can increase growing media space with, holds water well. And that's one reason they like it. And they just like degrading natural materials. So one thing I always say, if you're keeping your plants too wet, you're absolutely opening up yourself to fungus gnats. Um, a good indicator that you're keeping your soil too wet is if you start to see little mushrooms pop up, little fungi. That means it's too wet, and it also could mean that you're not getting sufficient light. So, good thing to watch out for, good thing to be mindful of. Now, the good news is they rarely damage indoor pests or indoor plants, but it stinks to have them around. Who wants more flies flying around than what they already have? So, uh, I've included in my notes some things you can do to keep these from happening. Letting your surface soil dry as much as possible is going to be so kind of getting those good dry downs. Um, One thing I wish I would have included a picture in, but I didn't. And next time, if you want to reach out, I can give you examples. These sticky traps. There's these yellow sticky cards that you can put out, and it'll capture a lot of those. If you look at this picture of the fungus gnat, that's what he's trapped in. He's trapped in a yellow sticky card. Sticky cards are in this industry are an invaluable tool because not only do they capture and reduce the population, it helps you get a better idea of what pest is going around. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like to have to capture a fly and then try to hold it up to the mic or hold it up to the lens and try to figure out what it is. These sticky cards just make it so much easier. It shows all their body parts and just gives you a better idea. And you might catch something that's so small that you didn't know you had. There's a lot of there, Dealing with fungus gnats has been a time just a big subject within the industry. This is talking about a species of Basilicus. I believe that's a wasp. Don't quote me there. Like I said, horticulturist, not entomologist. But you apply them to the soil, and essentially what they'll do is they will eat that larvae of the fungus gnat, and it will help eradicate them that way without having to use any type of chemicals or anything like that. And if you suspect that you might be having a fungus gnat outbreak, or if you know you are, it's best to repot, get rid of that soil, wash off the plant roots, and start again. All right. Next one, spider mites. Big pain. Hate dealing with these guys. Nothing more demoralizing than seeing that web of doom on your plant, especially if it's something you're growing for like a food crop, because that makes it virtually unsellable. So spider mites damage plants with their mouth parts, their needle-like mouth parts. So what they'll do is they'll start eating plant stems or leaves, and that disrupts that flow of nutrients, and so it's not getting to where it needs to go, and that can cause stunting, stippled appearance on the leaves, which is unsightly, and it can yellow the leaves. Um, some things you can do with spider mites, washing. You can kind of try to manually get these off. Uh, Keeping your tools and things clean is going to be paramount. And they can spread on your hands, clothing, watering cans. So it's good to just uh, get a good sanitation. Um, there are insecticidal soaps, plant oil extracts, and things of that nature that you can apply to your plants to stop spider mite outbreaks. But one of the biggest things you can do is just practice good sanitation. If you're bringing a new plant home, give it a good look over. Because that's what happens a lot is a lot of these plants get shipped in and they might have spider mites on them. They may have developed at the garden store or wherever they came from. All right, thrips. I put this one in bold because thrips are just the bane of this industry. Um, they kind of follow that same script as their spider mite counterparts. They scrape the leaves. They have different mouth parts, but it still causes really similar damage, sucking the fluid that's released, bringing that honeydew out. And they damage the leaves. They'll leave silvery streaks, which is actually their excrement or frass, as we call insect. Uh, you know what I'm talking about. Flowers, they can become streaked, distorted, and that comes from not getting the proper water and nutrients that because they're being disrupted essentially. One way to tell if you have thrips, you'll start to see these little exoskeletons. They're white, very small. You might need a magnifying glass. But another way to tell is if you suspect you might have a thrips infestation, it is super important you can pick the plant up if it's a small enough plant, get a piece of notebook paper or a folder or something like that, and just kind of give that plant a couple shakes, and these will fall out. And so that's where you kind of know, oh, there's a problem here. Um, there's an absolute ton of thrips remediation things. If you're interested in that, or if you suspect you might have a thrips problem, either indoor or outdoors, reach out to me. It's something that we're constantly working on. There's a bunch of pesticides, insecticidal soaps, neem oil, plant oil extracts. What works best for you will depend on your situation and where the plant is located. All right, let's move to scale. Scales can be annoying. They also follow that sucking mouth parts, so they feed on plant sap. A lot of times, if you have one, you're going to see another one. One thing, scales don't move as much. They like to kind of move in once they know there's a good host. So you'll often see if there's a thrips or aphids or something that's causing that, you might see some scale move in too. Um, and if you get enough of them, they're very prolific. They will really start to feed on your plant. And like we said, once you disrupt that kind of highway of nutrients and things, the leaves are going to yellow, drop, slows the growth, stunts plants, things like that. And I wish I would have. I thought I added the other picture, but I guess I didn't. If you Google scales, they're very unsightly. They'll be all over your plant, up and down, and very noticeable. Um, and as far as reduction techniques, there, washing them off. You can wash them off technically. That won't solve your problem in the long run, but it is something you can do. Physical removal, like I said, with your finger or something like that, gently, because you can also damage the plant. There's like I said, a number of different pesticides, horticulture oils, insecticide soaps. Like I said, what you choose to use like that is kind of dependent on your situation and where it's growing. So make sure. And with that, I think we're going to move to the end. I know that's a lot of information. Maybe some of it was a little redundant, and I apologize for that. But if there's any questions or anything I can clear up or answer, I'd like to take the time to do that now.
I think there are several questions in the chat.
Oh, excellent. Let me pull that up. Ah, okay. So I'm just gonna go down the line real quick. So Dr. Brown is asking about measuring humidity. They make thermometers that you can do. I remember uh, they make it and they run the gamut in price. You don't need something super expensive or intricate, in my opinion. Just something to give you kind of a good idea. Like I said, in a lot of these plants, it's beneficial but not necessary. There's small thermometers, like I remember that I got off Amazon when my daughter was born because we were trying to keep it a little more humid in the house. But yeah, humidity gauges or thermometers online are good for
Hydrometers.
that. What's that?
Hydrometers.
Yes, hydrometers. Um, so Elena, you asked about the holiday cacti blooming several times a year, and yes, that is not uncommon. I have heard people that get those blooming when they maybe think, oh, I didn't think it did this time of year. Like we kind of talked about, light cycles can depend. That can be one thing. Like I said, if I had to pick something that was probably the most the biggest factor, that light is going to be a big one for when it decides, oh, time to put some flowers out. Or as we talked about, temperature swings can kind of cause that. And just the variety itself. They're funny little plants that like to show off. So, okay. Okay, so preference for using tap water versus reverse osmosis uh, for houseplants. All right, so this one I almost hesitated to put in here because I don't expect people to go buy an RO converter or like to purchase only distilled water for your plants. It's just important to think about, with our tap water, what's in it. Some place, not in a bad way, but in the sense of like, some places have higher lime, or some places might put more fluoride just because of stuff that of location and things like that. Usually tap water is fine. I really wouldn't even, if it's working for you, then I wouldn't change it. Unless you start to see issues and you can't figure out why, well, it could be that tap water. Um, a big one that I see when people do things like start growing hydroponically, that can really mess with kind of the plant's pH, and in turn that messes with with the root's ability to uptake nutrients. So I think as long as your plants look healthy to you, I wouldn't change anything. I mean, I guess if you're really concerned about it, one thing you could do is get like maybe a Brita, like a secondhand Brita somewhere, and just use it as a good way to filter that out. Um, Eleanor, you said best time to replant. Was that just in general?
I meant holiday cacti, but
Oh yeah.
all most plants that grown inside.
Um, it depends. Um, Dormancy is really a good time. Kind of as we move. I hesitate with that because there's some things you don't want to replant in the winter. I would say like fall time, kind of as we're kind of winding, maybe early to mid fall as we're kind of winding off that growth cycle, but things are starting to kind of cruise in to a little bit of dormancy. So it's usually not recommended to just uproot them in the middle of winter because that can cause issues with temperature. But I think like you know, late summer to mid fall is probably your best window.
What about the holiday cacti? Should we wait until they finish blooming completely?
Um, yeah, it wouldn't hurt. I I don't know. I don't know 100%. I'd have to look at that one. But I would wait. I would wait until you're just completely green. Because what happens when you're in flowering, the plant is focusing a lot of its energy towards that. And if you do that, you could be looking at a little bit of transplant shock just because it's throwing it off of its normal routine. And so, yeah, if you had to repot, I would say, you know, uh, just before maybe just before or after, sorry, after that flower cycle.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anything I can clarify? I know some of that's about as clear as mud with the dependencies and things, but
Once again, for pests, could you repeat the names of the horticulture oils,
yeah.
brands?
So there's one a good oil one called neem oil, NEEM. That's a really good one for knocking out a kind of a broad spectrum of insects. Um, and neem oil can also is really good for stopping an infestation before it starts. Neem oil can kind of smother those eggs or larvae before they have a chance to proliferate.
How much do you need to apply?
Now that depends. Whenever people ask that, I say follow the directions on the bottle because it's very dependent. One thing I wanted to add, I'll look at this real quick. A lot of the information for this I got from the University of Minnesota Extension and the North Carolina State University Extension. There was some really good stuff. The North Carolina State Extension is known for just being a fountain of knowledge for a lot of things agriculturally related, so that was good. But yeah, the Minnesota University of Minnesota Extension has a very thorough and very diverse list of caring for your houseplants. I'd be happy to share that in the chat should we want. I think I have the general. You know what? This one is just one of the facets, but it will take you to the entire web page where there's lots of different tabs. Anything else I can expand upon?
Looks like no, you've been very informative.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, I do love, helping people with their plant issues. Like I said, really big into plant diseases and plant health. So if you're ever experiencing any issues with your plants, garden, indoor, whatever, reach out to me. It's something that I like doing. I like building experience in, and it's free. So I'll
Mhm.
do the best I can to help you out with that, or anything plant related. Now that you've heard of me, you please utilize me. That's all I can say.
I have a question. Is it
Yep.
only Kansas residents that can uh, use extension services like soil
Okay,
testing and stuff, or other states can too?
so okay, I guess I focus on Kansas, but no, a lot of every state has their own extension service. It's usually through a university. Um, and so I think like Like I said, Minnesota has theirs through University of Minnesota, but you go through a lot of times it's state colleges, like the ag colleges, the land grant universities. They're the ones doing that kind of you know, consumer and uh, agricultural family nutrition resource experiments and research and things like that. So yeah, Missouri has their own extension, very thorough, really good stuff. But yeah, uh, now that we live in this, day and age of internet and all the knowledge at our fingertips, if there's ever something you want to look up, like especially, plant related, add the word extension after your search, and it'll bring up a lot of results from a lot of different places. So the more info, the better. Trying to share as much as we can and learn from each other. So
Thank you. This was very good advice.
good deal. I'm glad. This has been fun.
Thank you very
Thank,
much, everybody.
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you all.
Enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.